Welcome to Metricum. So, have you ever gotten a water test report back and just stared at it? Felt like you were trying to read a completely foreign language? Yeah, you are not alone. In this explainer, we're going to dive in and actually make sense of it all.
Right, you get this sheet, it's just full of acronyms, random numbers, but the real question is, what is this data actually telling you about your water? Is it clean? Is it contaminated? Is it okay? That's exactly what we're here to break down.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the absolute basics of just decoding the report. Then we're going to tackle 4 key parameters: pH, TSS, and, you knew it was coming, that often confused duo, BOD, and COD. And finally, we'll get to the really powerful stuff: how to spot patterns and put your data into context so you can turn those numbers into something you can actually use.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. You know, a water report, it isn't just a piece of lab paperwork. It's so much more. Think of it like a diagnostic tool, a snapshot of exactly what's happening inside your water at one specific moment in time.
At its absolute core, that report is trying to answer some pretty fundamental questions. It's basically giving you the vital signs of the water. It's telling you about its health, its chemistry, and ultimately whether it's okay for whatever you need it for, whether that's safely discharging it back into the environment or reusing it in your process.
First up is a parameter you're almost guaranteed to see on any report: pH. It's kind of the foundational measurement. It really sets the stage for everything else that follows. So, it's a pretty simple scale, right? A pH of 7 is neutral. Think pure water. Anything below 7, we call that acidic. Anything above 7 is alkaline or basic. Seems simple enough, doesn't it? But oh man, its importance goes so much deeper than that.
Okay, and here's a really key point. A high or low pH isn't really pollution in the same way, say, a chemical spill is. Instead, it's a crucial control parameter. So why is that? Well, because the pH level basically dictates how all the other chemicals behave. It can either help or hurt your treatment processes. And if it's way off balance, you're going to see stuff like corroded pipes and equipment. It really is the master variable that influences everything else.
All right, next up, let's talk about a parameter you can often see with your own eyes. We're talking about physical pollution, and we measure it as TSS, which stands for Total Suspended Solids. So TSS, Total Suspended Solids. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's all those tiny little particles of silt, dirt, organic matter, all the gunk that's just floating around in the water, but hasn't actually dissolved. This is the stuff that makes water look cloudy or murky. And this really gets to why we care so much about TSS. Think about it. In the environment, cloudy water blocks sunlight. That can kill aquatic plants and just totally disrupt the ecosystem. And in an industrial setting, oh, it's a nightmare. Those solids will clog up your filters, your pumps, your pipes, leading to some really expensive maintenance. So if you see a high TSS reading, that's a direct signal that your solids removal or your settling process just isn't getting the job done.
All right, let's get to the big one. The 2 parameters that probably cause the most confusion: BOD and COD. Now, they both measure organic pollution, but, and this is a big but, they do it in very, very different ways.
Let's start with BOD. That stands for Biochemical Oxygen Demand. The easiest way to think about this is as the microbe food measurement. It tells us exactly how much oxygen all the little microorganisms are going to need to break down the biodegradable stuff in the water. Things like sewage, food waste, agricultural runoff. So if you have a high BOD, it means there's a big feast for those microbes, and they're going to use up a ton of oxygen to eat it all.
Now, let's compare that to COD, or chemical oxygen demand. So if BOD is the microbe food, think of COD as the total pollution measurement. This test uses a really strong chemical reaction to figure out how much oxygen is needed to break down pretty much all the organic stuff in there. That includes all the biodegradable stuff that BOD measures, plus all the non-biodegradable chemicals that microbes just can't touch.
So here is the crucial takeaway. BOD measures the load on the natural biological ecosystem. COD, on the other hand, measures the total chemical pollution burden. Getting this distinction right is absolutely critical if you want to understand what's really going on with your water.
And this leads us to a really key insight. Since COD is measuring everything BOD does, plus a whole lot more, your COD value is pretty much always going to be higher than your BOD. But here's the secret. The gap between those 2 numbers, that's where the real story is hiding. And this is where it gets super practical. Let's say your water has a high BOD. That tells you the pollution is mostly stuff microbes can eat. That's great news if you're using a biological treatment system, right? The microbes will have a field day. But what if your COD is super high, but your BOD is low? That's a huge red flag. It's signaling that a lot of the pollution isn't biodegradable. Your biological system is gonna struggle, and you'll probably need to look at other options, like chemical or physical treatments instead.
Okay, so now that we've got a handle on the individual parameters, let's zoom out a bit and talk about reading the patterns. Because look, a single number is just a data point. But when you see a pattern, that's when you get real operational intelligence.
Let's see how these things work together. If your pH is just swinging wildly from one day to the next, that points to an unstable process somewhere. If your TSS drops way down after your treatment system, hey, you know it's working. And what about this one? If your COD suddenly spikes but your BOD stays about the same, that is a huge clue that some new, non-biodegradable contaminant might have just entered your system. And finally, we've come to what is maybe the most important point of all. A number, all by itself on a piece of paper means, well, it means almost nothing without context. To really unlock its meaning, you have to compare it to something.
First, let's talk historical trends. So let's say your BOD is usually stable, right around, say, 45 or 50 milligrams per liter. We see that in January, February, and again in April. But then, bam! In March, it skyrockets to 150. See? That March result isn't just a number anymore. It's an alarm bell screaming that something unusual happened that month, and you need to figure out what it was fast.
And second, you have to compare your results against your regulatory standards. This is a big one. Your water might seem perfectly fine, but if your BOD result comes back at 40 and your discharge permit says the limit is 30, well, you suddenly have a compliance problem on your hands. This comparison is what tells you not just what your water quality is, but whether it's actually acceptable from a legal and environmental standpoint.
So you see, this is how it works. Data becomes a story as soon as you give it context. By comparing your results against standards, against your own historical trends, and even against different spots in your system, like before and after treatment, that's how you transform a boring list of numbers into a powerful story about your water's health.
And really, that's what this all comes down to. I love this quote. It just says it perfectly. We're not just looking at data for the sake of looking at data. What we're doing is taking a snapshot, a picture of the inner life of the water, so we can understand its condition, see the risks, and figure out how to best manage it. So the next time one of those water reports lands on your desk, don't just see a bunch of numbers. Try to see the story, because now you have the tools to decode it. The only question left is, what story is your water telling you?